Hi everyone. Okay, we'll begin now. Yep. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and guests. Welcome to the 7th graduation showcase by SUT's Architecture and Sustainable Design pillar. My name is Yunqing and I will be your host. We have an exciting lineup of programs today, as seen on the screen now. Before we begin, we would like to thank our main sponsor, TAC Products and Services Private Limited, widely known as Lemmy TAC, for today's event. And we would also like to welcome our honored guest, Roland Schnitzer, Senior Partner at Foster and Partners. Roland will be part of our panel discussion later. Now we would like to play a short video about our grad show.
This year, Next Stop celebrates the unique journey of every undergraduate student in ASD. The challenges that every student has undergone is strongly reflected in their design ethos and style that propagates through the grad show. Through the 6 categories that connect the plethora of ideas from all individuals, the exhibition demonstrates the versatility of every student that have embarked on a journey of self-discovery as they identify where they are now and where they are heading next. My team and I decided to create a module that agglomerates in numerous patterns representing the diversity of projects that we are capable of producing.
The modules are designed in the form of an extruded parallelogram, which are partially laminated. The modules are made of corrugated cardboard, which are fabricated in-house in SUTD's fabrication lab with the help of the Zan cutter. The intention is to make the modules out of recyclable material that can be repurposed. The models are 3D printed out of white PLA filament, which contrasts clearly with the dark corrugated boards. This makes the models the centerpiece of the exhibition and creates a sense of unity throughout the whole exhibit. We are excited to present to you Next Stop, celebrating the milestones of every student's journey as we move towards our next stop.
This is the second time we are holding this hybrid grad show. First, we would like to highlight that we will be hosting our physical exhibition at the SUTD Campus Center from 11 March to 11 April this year. We would love to see you there. We would also like to share our projects with you virtually through the ASD Gradshow website, which will lead you to a shared landing page where you can view works by students from the bachelor's and the master's program. Through our works, we wish to showcase the diverse body of ideas and outcomes that our students have explored with and arrived at, regardless of whether you're an aspiring architect, a practitioner, or anyone with an appreciation for architecture. We hope that the works will inspire you to broaden your imagination of the possibilities of the built environment. Yeah. Our exhibit Next Stop features the 6 categories: systematic assembly, productive ecology, recontextualizing narratives, recalibrating wellness, empowering communities, and exploring possibilities. These categories are conceived as islands that we students had to journey through at various points in our curriculum. Like an expedition, it was filled with many opportunities and trials. The student avatar designs in the website are custom for every student and represents the unique combination of interest and talent each student possesses. Next slide. Moving forward, I would like to welcome Professor Tai Li Xiang to give a short opening address. Professor Tai Li Xiang, please.
Thank you. Well, good evening to everyone, and welcome to ASD Gradshow 7 2022 Next Stop. To our graduates who completed the first stop of architecture education, many of you are returning to MArch degree course, and all of you have worked very hard during your structured internship. You deserve a good rest to recharge. And to some of you who are listening in and wanting to find out more about the world of architecture, I would like to share with you just a few thoughts and insights. Having worked in this field for more than 30 years, I hope my experience will be useful for you for your next stop. So first word, vision. Many of us chose architecture as a career because we wanted to be a visionary to help change the world. If you feel the same, you're probably at the right place, still at the right place. Now, industry practice may not always sound like it's changing the world, but it is actually the right place where we hone our skills and understand the forces at work. It is like a rite of passage. And for those of us who, with increasing years, master practice, we'll be in a better position to change the world. Well, I have to humbly say I've done that, and I'm quite sure many other heroes have done that too. So keep up the vision. Secondly, it's about facing a more complex world. I like the time when I practiced as a young architect. The world has become more complex. As architects, we're not always the quickest to embrace technology, but today things have changed. You are the generation who are born with the digital tools in your hands, literally, and armed with such skills as computational design. Well, you could very well be the generation, and I call it the secret weapon to unlock the inefficiencies and legacy practices of this world. So be brave and use the tools in your hands. And the third thing I want to share with you is this word collaboration. The world is uncertain for everyone, and not just for architects only. We need to learn to work together more. I hope that your journey ahead is full of collaboration with industry partners, government agencies, and even fellow colleagues in SUTD. The multidisciplinary foundation that was laid in you will come back as a powerful skill to navigate through a more complex world, and it will only become more complex in the future. So I want to just reach out and thank the team that prepared the Gradshow. I'll read out the following names: Waihin, Diane, Joey, Keith, Nicholas, Phoebe, Kaijie, Yijie, Songling, Megan, Xianhe, Jonathan, Melvin, Yinshu, Nazaria, Jeff, and Dixon. And Christine, special thanks to you for guiding the students and leading them in this preparation. So the wonderful team has worked tirelessly to deliver the show. And with this final appreciation, I want to thank all of you and encourage you to keep up the good work. And we in ASD, speaking on behalf of all the faculty and staff, will always be a home and support to all of you. And thank you very much for inviting me to this. Back to you, Yijing.
Thank you, Professor Tai Li Xiang. Next up, selected students will present on their previous works, sharing their design inspirations and process. Firstly, we have Matthew. Matthew is one who tatters the line that divides old from new, simultaneously believing in the qualities of the analog past while pushing the frontiers of the future. The grain in negative film and the clack of a typewriter enthuse him just as much as the whine of a 3D printer and the hum of a computer training a machine learning model. He will be presenting to us his speculation of an underwater future brought about by severe climate change through the lens of a virtual reality experience that challenges fears and anxieties related to a submerged way of life. Matthew, please.
Thank you, Yunqing. So, hi, I'm Matthew, and I'm a current Term 9 master's student. And I'd like to present my project titled The Iridescent Museum. So the project is a world-building speculative project that uses augmented reality as a medium for expressing my speculation of an architectural solution to a speculative problem. This future world was created with reference to various sci-fi texts and films to the likes of like Day After Tomorrow and Blade Runner. Built was a result of global warming leading to Atlantification of the Arctic Sea. And this leads to the melting of the Arctic shelf in great quantities. And this fresh water enters the ocean, which eventually causes a critical desalination point to be reached. And when that happens, it halts the Atlantic meridional overturning circulations that ferry warm water essentially through convection currents. And this creates the conditions necessary for like a colossal storm to occur and rapidly plunging the northern hemisphere into an ice age, freezing landmass. And thus the population is forced to take refuge underwater, which brings me to my speculative world that I've created. So the setting of my project is in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and this is a render of it. And now you'll be able to see that my project is one that is nestled within a valley, and it's just below the currently raised sea levels. The museum, in terms of its form, takes on this brutally honest form where the inner programs dictate the outer shell and its architecture follows. In the next slide, you will see a cross-section of the building in a very simple format. Right. So the experiential quality of the museum provides a space to explore and face the predominant fears that have developed from living underwater. And I've identified these fears to be claustrophobia, the fear of darkness, as well as social anxiety. And these have developed from living in isolation in confined spaces below the water where light penetration is weak. Right, so the museum mechanism relies on the manipulation of light to serve as a powerful tool by which the relationship between sense and perception is challenged. And this creates I do this by creating specific atmospheres that evoke tensions related to these relevant fears within the visitors. The museum aims to give visitors an opportunity to face their fears, but caveat, this does not necessitate that they overcome that fear. So initially, the experience is individual, and the visitors naturally project their own fears onto the exhibit, creating a unique experience that speaks to them. However, at the end of the exhibition, the visitors' experience then intersects with other visitors, and the understanding of that fear becomes more community-based. A communal understanding of this fear sort of creates the opportunity for visitors to realize that they are not experiencing an isolated fear, but rather it is one that plagues the entire society as a whole. Okay, so now I'll run through like the structure of how my museum comes about. It's built of a system of parts. Firstly, you go through an entry corridor, a lead-in to the museum, and then 3 experiential or exhibition spaces. Each one is separated by a transition space. And then finally, the exit is made of a long communal corridor. And each sphere represents one of the exhibition spaces that I've mentioned. So 3 exhibition spaces in total. So we'll start with the entrance space. The entrance serves as a segue into the first exhibit that challenges the fear of darkness. There is a use of progressively shorter light tubes to create the illusion of a longer corridor. And in my next slide, you'll see a rendering of this effect. And the idea is to create an illusion right off the bat using light. So light distorts that spatial quality of the museum, and this is a render. So now I'll look into how the exhibition spaces are broken down. Each exhibition space has 2 large portions. The first part is a physical space, and within this physical space, there's some cues of what's going on in the next space, and it creates suspense to the theme of the exhibit. The 2 portions are broken up by a center part, which is the kink, and the kink of the exhibition space intentionally obscures the physicality of the second portion, and also signifies a transition between that physical and virtual reality that I'll go deeper into soon. So in the second portion of the exhibit, it contains a physical space with physical elements that form the basis of that virtual experience. And within this space, visitors are not privy to the visual aspect of reality. Instead, they experience a corresponding virtual museum space where the experience is amplified through the physical elements of the space. What this means is that you can feel the exhibit, but you see something different. So this is a rendering of what that means. So I'll go through my first exhibit, which is the fear of darkness. So the first exhibit deals with darkness, and the exhibit undermines your sense of sight with a virtual space that is misaligned from reality. and it heightens and overwhelms the other senses of touch and feel. I'll break down the exhibit now. So the first portion is a continuation from the entrance. If you remember earlier, those light tubes. So there are light tubes in this portion, and they decrease in brightness or intensity, which cues the entrance with a space of to be a space of complete darkness, pulling the visitor in. In my next slide, you'll see a rendering of that effect, where it completely leads to darkness. The visitor then enters the second portion, which physically has mildly undulating floor with a series of fabrics that hang from the ceiling. However, in this space, the visitor actually enters the virtual version of the space. So they feel that floor, but what they see is something that is dramatized in terms of scale. So much steeper undulating floors with large sheets of suspended translucent fabrics. These fabrics gently sway in the wind, obscuring the visitor's view, creating a sort of effect of shifting shapes, which are enveloped in partial darkness. In the next slide, you'll see a diagram which shows the dramatization of reality as the visitor transverses it. So the bottom one is reality and the top one is virtual. In this slide, we'll see how there's a light well within this virtual exhibit, which floods the right side of the exhibition space. But in contrast, this makes it hard to see the left side of the exhibition space, which is the part that's transversed by the visitor. And this causes a sense of disorientation and sort of like fear of what's ahead or what's unknown. Now we'll see a two-image slide. The top image is the render of the physical space, while the bottom image is that corresponding virtual space with the steep terrain and translucent fabric sheets that the visitor visually sees. So in the interest of time, I'll share two exhibits in total. So the second one is on social anxiety. And the concept of this is that the exhibit brings about the feeling of self-consciousness and anxiety through a crowded piazza, and the visitor has to navigate through that piazza. So in the same way, I'll break down the mechanism of my exhibit. So the first portion of the exhibit contains some projections of shadows on the wall, shadows of people, and the sounds of people talking. This cues in the visitor that there should be something more beyond that kink. There should be people, and it sort of draws the visitor in. So in my next slide, you'll see a rendering of that effect, where the shadows on the blank walls are animated with movement and sound. And the light at the kink makes it hard to see what's next. For the second portion of the exhibit, the physical space is filled with clusters of poles wrapped in fabric, and this gives that tactility of brushing by people in a crowded space. So while the visitor is here, they actually see a virtual reality, and this virtual reality greets the visitor beginning with an ascent of a staircase. The visitor soon finds him or herself in the middle of a seemingly endless piazza of people. And as the visitor reaches the top of the staircase, the sound of people talking dies down momentarily to suggest the crowds notice the visitor. And this creates a sense of self-consciousness in the visitor right from the beginning. And now the visitor has the task of traversing or like traveling through these groups of people to the other end. Now here we see a view of the physicality versus the virtual space, on top being the physical and below being the virtual. So within my exhibit, I've used a mirrored ceiling and tiled floor, giving a sense of an endless space that goes on, further dramatizing the effect of a crowded piazza. So now between each exhibit, there is a mediation space or a transition space, and you can think of this as a palate cleanser, like a green tea between courses in a Japanese restaurant. So these spaces are neutral spaces for reflection and calming the senses. And it is rendered in with monochromatic textures that with curved walls that subtract from your understanding of the physicality of the space, making it difficult to understand the sense perception of the space, and it allows the mind to enter a blank state with no distractions. So we'll have a look at what that space looks like. So here we have a split screen image of two spaces, the top one being black on white and the bottom one being white on black. And a curved spiral ramp essentially that descends through the space, and there are curved walls that surround it, making it hindering that spatial perception of the space. And this creates that blank, neutral, meditative headspace that I want to put the visitor within. So finally, we come to the end of the exhibit. There is a larger breathable space that gives this is a communal space, and this is where the visitor's experience intersects with other visitors. And the space is composed of projections and quotes from previous visitors. and their emotions and experiences as they went through those exhibits, as you can see here. The audio recordings of previous visitors are also overlaid in this space, and a sense of intimacy and authenticity is created. So here visitors come to the realization that their fears and feelings are shared amongst the community, creating an opportunity to bond with the larger population. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation of the Iridescent Museum. Thank you, and back to you, Yun-Sing.
Thank you, Matthew. Next, we have Natalie. Natalie, through her studies and work experiences, has reinforced her passion for inclusive and public-oriented spaces. She believes that innovative and sustainable designs have to begin now for a greener future. She will be presenting to us an urban intervention that reimagines the future of work by decentralizing workspaces in the CBD into neighborhoods. The project taps on a kit of parts made of mass-engineered timber that can be easily reconfigured and disassembled. I will hand the time over to Natalie.
Hello, thank you, Yun-Ching, and good evening, everyone. I'm Natalie, and on behalf of Diane and myself, I present to you Kawong. So Kawong is a project done in our last term of undergraduate studies in Sustainable Options Studio 3. The presentation will cover three main topics: our concept, the Kawong, the Mason domino, and the future of work. So let's start with the Kawong. So what is this strange word, Kawong? It is this pattern of interlocking circles, commonly found in the Java culture. We use this as the inspiration for our design strategy to create modular systems relating to structure and shading. How we do this is by overlapping canopy structures to create regions of shade inspired by the Google HQ by BIG and Tedderwick Studios. The creation of a vast amount of shade will also help to tackle the sun that we experience in Singapore. With several precedent studies done, we decided on a structural system that has external bracing with internal grids, and this is topped with a canopy of shade. So we present to you our Mason domino, a bay of structures. So here's an image of the 1 to 20 model that we made during the term. It can be deconstructed into the following kit of parts, consisting essentially of columns, beams, and slabs. Steel pipes are introduced into the main structural system to reinforce the stability of the system. The Mason is made of several key modules: the umbrella, the main columns, small modules that are 4 by 4 by 3, long modules that are 8 by 4 by 3, and big modules that are 8 by 8 by 4.5. Let's now zoom into the detailed section of the umbrella, also created at 1 to 20. Since the Mason domino is purely a bay of structures, the detailed section here shows the skin and the inner slats. The skin will be the first light diffusion layer, and the slats the second. The skin also allows water to be channeled down the central pipe. The slats allow for wind to flow through, and the separation of the two layers reduces the amount of radiation transferred between them while allowing for ventilation. Moving down the umbrella, we have the pipe to column connections, where the columns are slotted in and bolted. So here's an assembly-disassembly video of our Mason to re-emphasize its modularity and design for disassembly. Okay, so the interior structure and the umbrellas form overlapping grids that are 45 degrees to each other. Black represents the voxel grid, while yellow is the umbrella grid. When we draw circles around the umbrellas, we begin to see traces of the kawong pattern. And this is how we intend to create the canopy of shade for our project. Now, let's go through our urban strategy and site studies that we've done for our site. So, the COVID-19 pandemic that continues to affect our lifestyles has caused a paradigm shift towards the culture of working from home. Office spaces become more redundant. So why don't we seize this opportunity to decentralize the office spaces within our residential areas instead? We can tap on the currently underutilized void decks and vacant spaces in between blocks of HDBs as potential sites. And it can also serve to build stronger community ties and promote racial integration. Given the availability of void decks and vacant parking spaces in between residential blocks, our project proposes how we can make use of this opportunity to create co-working spaces to accommodate the new work-from-home culture and improve the liveliness of the neighborhood through public space. Therefore, we have chosen the in-between spaces of the Verasami HDBs, the open-air car parking lots. So we ran some climatic and programmatic analysis on our site, where all simulations done together with the context and site are done within a 450-meter radius from the site. Well, a few key takeaways is that, well, it's really hot here, and the high solar radiation, and given this high solar radiation, especially because it's an open-air car park, we noted that, well, it was quite accessible too, given these cycling paths that we got from URA. And the programmatic study within the 450-meter radius from this area has revealed that it is a good transition space from the residential to commercial that we could experiment with. So with all this information gathered about our site, this is our mapping strategy. Here's the site again, with the north arrow on the top left. We first place the voxel grid onto the site, and then overlay the umbrella grid onto it. So by taking into account the north wind on site, and the south wind plus some turbulences, we have these arrows that define channels and guide the massing. The massing is made by taking into account these wind channels. And this was covered with a simple canopy. The canopy was populated with umbrellas, and afterwards the massing blocks were refined. So if we explode these blocks, we can see this programmatic mix. The lowest and highest portions of the massing is more public-oriented, with recreational, F&B, and community spaces. Office spaces with smaller versions of recreation and F&B spaces are located in the center of the massing. The ground level of this massing is made mostly of void spaces, so that ground circulation is unobstructed and people can traverse the space. Vertical cores in the structure allow for circulation upwards as well. So let's go into our articulated model that resulted from this massing strategy. So this is the site plan, where it occupies void spaces, and it comprises of the kawong patterning of concentric canopies that serve as the main structure. Due to the changing heights, it resulted in varying depths that resemble fish scales when seen from the top. So our intention was to keep the first floor completely public and porous. We envisioned this to be a node for cyclists to take a break in the middle of their cycling journey, and they can benefit from the public amenities here. At the street level, we can see the changing canopy heights, which creates levels of porosity where more light enters when the sun angle is lower, but at the same time shades the dwellers from the intense afternoon sun that is common here in Singapore's context. From this view, we can see how the structure maintains the ground circulation for cyclists and the general public. People in the levels above can look over the railings to glimpse at the activity below. Going upwards, there are more office spaces. Voids are carved within the structure of the building, following the wind analysis that we did before. The office spaces are complemented by a vast amount of public space, forming a vertical kampong. Work becomes an opportunity to foster new social interactions and relationships, which is how this strategy intends to bring people together. The office spaces are curated based on a co-working setting. Everyone of all backgrounds will be able to work in the same environment collaboratively, It is designed such that the collaborative nodes are sandwiched by the open seating and hot desking plans. The 6 zones, as identified in the plan, are distributed across the entire area, providing an even mix of work types. So let's have a look at the office space from the cafe. So there are certain regions in the office that have an open plan that would be buzzing with activity. But if we look at the office from a more central region, the buzz is replaced by more quiet zones like discussion pods and meeting rooms. The office is also furnished with mixed reality meeting rooms to better facilitate this hybrid working condition that we experience today. Well, even though these 2 zones occur in the same space, we hope that the design of the office space and the spatial distribution of furniture will allow for them to coexist while still maintaining productivity. This section perspective shows how the various zones in the office coexist with each other. We believe that a good office environment consists of a mix of work and play. Hence, the office space is layered between zones of dining, recreation, retail, and play. Just to reiterate once more, our design focuses on a modular system that is designed for this assembly. It provides shelter and shade to its occupants. All are welcome into the office space that caters to various work types. And we hope that our design also helps with the mental well-being of individuals by providing a seamless transition from work to relaxation. At the top of our structure, we get views over the shophouses. Dining and recreation activities are dispersed at these higher levels to also draw people up into this mass of structure. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Lastly, we have Wei Wei. Wei Wei, through her studies and research, has developed an interest in environmental and social architecture that aims to support the growing needs for healthy living in today's society, especially with the aging population, hoping to make an impact and improve their well-being. She will be presenting to us a potential urban intervention in Chinatown that not only engages the elderly in physical activities, but also provides a green healing and resting spot while giving them the opportunity to learn some digital skills while using the space, allowing them to learn, rest, and play. I will now hand the time now to Wei Wei.
Thank you, Ying-Ching. Hello, everyone. I am Wei Wei, and I'll be presenting my second option studio project done by Clifford and I. For the first part of the project, we designed programs and spaces for the Singapore Senior Learning Center, SSLC, in Chinatown, Majestic. Our SSLC was about teaching the elderly how to garden using digital tools. So we designed furniture sets to be used in the SSLC for the elderly that facilitates their learning environment that also has gardening features. And then we propagated them into the SSLC space, planning for different zones of learning and gardening. But I will not dwell on this part of the project much due to time constraint, but focus more on how we connected this interior story of SSLC to the larger urban picture of Chinatown, which is the second part of the project. What I'll be presenting is our urban intervention in Chinatown as an extension of SSLC. We want to extend the use of digital tools and digital knowledge they learned inside of the SSLC to promote active aging while having close connection with nature. Introducing our project Active Forest. So first, we will go through our site analysis. We first did a study on the density of greenery around our site in Chinatown. And overall, we could see that there's a large amount of greenery around the site. However, as we zoom in closer to the Old Man Square, there is not much greenery to be enjoyed, and this leads to spaces that are hot due to the lack of shading. So we did a shadow analysis on the region to confirm our hypothesis, and we found that it is indeed not shaded well. So one of the main concerns that we want to address with our intervention is to create more shaded area that can provide comfort for the elderly. Looking at the circulation, there are 3 main horizontal circulation linking to Sago Lane and through the MRT to the main street, and 2 longitudinal ones along the Terengganu and Bandar Street towards the HDB blocks. So as far as the Old Man Square is concerned, we find that it is well served and amply connected. It is also unique and quite an interesting space in the sense that it is filled with historical buildings around the area. Then next, we'll look at the urban story in Chinatown. So first point that we took note from the site visit was that elderly like to gather in shaded area. And they like to gather in public areas where there are healthy, active spaces that allows them to move or exercise their body. And lastly, they like to gather in green spaces where there are urban furnitures. So from that, we looked into the site organization. So we have two parts to this. Firstly, the grid, and secondly, the kit of parts. And what we really want to do is that we want to combine both of them with a series of congregations that then address the comfort level and increase the active level of the elderly. So having said that, our key intervention is the Old Man Square itself. And we can see from the image, Old Man Square has existing grid pattern. And this grid has a metering configuration of 3 meter by 3 meter. And our intervention is to kind of use this grid to form the modules for our urban intervention. So this is the same existing grid that is on the square from the top view. And then for the intervention, we extend the grid towards the Maxwell MRT to provide a sheltered pathway that connects the main streets of the Old Man Square. Then next, we then identify the hotspots where the elderly likes to gather that is associated with the square. So highlighted in yellow is the stretch that has existing higher amount of shading with either tree, canopy, or shelter. And this blue area is the area where the Old Man Square exists that we would like to give more definition to. So within our grid pattern, we emphasize the green zigzag, which will be the zone of our actual intervention. It increases the area of spaces that elderly can gather because currently they don't gather it since it's too hot. So our extension is to create more shaded area in the day and more brightly lit area at night. And in the process, we provide a new connection to the MRT and define and reinforce the idea of the existing square with the double L as we form a sort of fall garden for the temple. So next, we will look at the kit of parts. These are the components that make up the kit of parts. We have 3 categories. First is a variety of activities to keep the elderly fit and healthy. Secondly is the components which allow the elderly to rest and relax under the protection of our Chinese mortified canopy shelter, providing shelter from the sun and rain, and also Chinese lanterns inserted to keep the places brightly lit at night. And at the same time, providing a feeling of familiarity with these Chinese elements. And lastly is the greens to create therapeutic spaces for the elderly in the form of like a dense forest defined by varying canopy heights. So now we'll take a look at how we can place these components within the grid that we have laid out. To do that, we decided to proportion the percentages of green activity and resting areas that we can have within the grid so that our respective categories of kit of part components can fit into their respective zones. So this scenario shows one with little to no green at around 10%, while majority is resting area. Not much elderly may gather as the lack of greenery makes the space dull. The next scenario is taking the greenery percentage to the extreme, where majority is greenery area combined with a bit of resting area. The varying heights of greens are used to form the dense canopy, and with this therapeutic quality, the space elderly will gather more. Lastly is the scenario which we kind of balances out all 3 aspects, 1/3 green, 1/3 resting, and 1/3 activity, which gives rise to a place that is not just therapeutic, but also with the added activities, the place becomes more vibrant and inviting, so more elderly will gather. So from the previous matrix, these are the kit of parts that we choose to propagate within our intervention space. Vertical is the percentage of exercises and horizontal is the percentage of greenery. So different kit of parts provide different level of engagement with different forms of exercises to teach them about horticulture and at the same time maintaining the park. So if you add all of them together, it combines into a holistic experience that offers resting, gardening, and exercising incorporated with e-learning. So using the kit of parts that we had, we propagated them along the intervention zone to create a circulation path by connecting the rest portions in our kit of parts. The circulation kind of branched out along the way so that it invites and draws people into coming into the intervention. Then we surround or envelope the circulation path that we had with the green portion of the kit of parts so that the whole path could be well shaded and at the same time forming a sort of fall garden for the Buddha relic temple. Then finally, we fill up the pockets of spaces between the green and circulation with the activity portion of our kit of parts, which provide and punctuated pockets of exercises causes for the elderly to keep them active as they walk down the path. Then finally, we bring in our canopy that is designed with Chinese motifs and inserted with Chinese lanterns. And so this is how it sits in our intervention. So this sense of familiarity could bring our intervention closer to home for the elderly, inviting them into the space and at the same time functioning as sheltered pathway in the day and a source of light at night, all while providing opportunity for them to engage in active aging with the help of digital tools. So now I'll go through with us a bit more in detail on how this is done in the next section of user experience. So as the elderly enter the space, they will be greeted by the therapeutic green space and places of rest under the shade of the trees. And these spaces also provide elderly with opportunities for social interactions. Then as they enter the urban park, there will be a workshop booths from SSLC, and these booths will kind of act as an extension of the SSLC and educate the elderly about digital technology and horticulture. There are also QR codes where elderly can scan and view tutorial videos on how to use different exercise equipments that are along the area. And also learn how to grow and maintain the greenery in the urban park using the QR codes. Therefore, allowing this urban intervention to extend the use of digital tools and knowledge to promote active aging with their peers while having close connection with nature, concluding our project Active Forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Wei. Having heard from the students, we will now invite our guests to engage in a short dialogue session moderated by Professor Christine to discuss how we as students can prepare for our future. Professor Christine, please.
Thank you, Yunqing. And thank you for the 3 presentation. It's really fantastic to hear the work. I'm sort of reliving the past years where I saw the work develop. So that was really nice to see. Roland, could you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, great. Hi, welcome to the session. Maybe I'll start off by just, kind of generic question. The idea that it's common practice to evaluate graduating students on their industry readiness. So I'm curious by, you kind of from hearing from the 3 students, what struck out about the way they work that you would value as assets for a future design professional?
Great. No, thank you so much. And thank you so much for flying me through 3 projects, hundreds of slides and a very brief moment there. So I very much enjoyed that. Thank you. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll just start on a brief general conversation. Yeah, the readiness. Well, what I liked is certainly a concern with the future that appears to be a common thread running through all 3 projects. Yeah, in the first one, in Matthew's case, which was slightly more on the apocalyptic side, of course, and then in Natalie's and Wei Wei's case, which are much more with the same issues applied to the current day, yeah, ranging from climate, kit of parts, to aging, all very, very critical issues to us going forward. So the idea of the future, the concern of the future is very much part of the architect's journey. And especially for you guys, I think we need to recognize that what, 40% of the pollution that gets emitted into the Earth's atmosphere is created by the work, by the buildings that we as architects create. Yeah. So your future depends very much on you doing your job well. Yeah. I think I couldn't perhaps put it any more simpler than to motivate you and to continue that passion in the environment, in the future, whether it be climate change, whether it be the aging, into your work. It is absolutely integral nowadays. And perhaps, as Matthew's job highlights, our survival depends on it. Yeah. And listen, in Matthew's case, listen, that was, I suspect Matthew wants, if I survive that coming of the ice age, I'm probably not scared of anything anymore. I probably the worst is already behind me. Yeah, but I did really like your views on the inside. I thought that the black and white imagery was perhaps the most successful way of communicating your vision, your spatial sensibilities, the sense of light in your spaces. I thought those were my favorite images. And with Natalie, yeah, I think also the kit of parts in both yours and Weiwei's job, I think the kit of parts does hold a lot of promise for us as we go into a more resource conscious age where we're not designing kits because we like them, but because they harbor the promise of disassembly and reuse elsewhere. Yeah, we're literally just demolishing an old building at the moment to build a new one. And the amount of effort we go through to recycle an old building so that it doesn't go into the landfill is extraordinary. Yeah. So the idea of a kit of parts would greatly ease that issue. Of course, suddenly every raw material is precious. And that's something that's very much on everyone's mindset nowadays anyway. And a kit of parts, the idea of a more cyclical design of reuse rather than recycle. Recycling is actually quite a strange word, if you ask me. Reuse is the appropriate term, perhaps, in the future. So I think the idea of the kit of parts was very interesting in both. Definitely something that the industry is currently very much engaged in. Yeah, the idea of cyclical design, of which a kit of parts is certainly a key component. Yeah, I like the. And I think that was both applies equally for Weiwei's case. And I think the interest in the social issues, the post-COVID adaptation, critical, of course, in this day and age. I think that's something that the industry is very much coming to terms with as well. So if you ask me about industry readiness, that is certainly a discourse that we'll all be having now and for the years to come. So I think that's also a very topical thing that concerns both of us, students and professionals alike, as of course is the aging. So both the subject matter I thought was very well chosen. And I think perhaps for both, the sense of context is something that would be very, very important in terms of where you're building, how you're building. You're building in Little India, you say it's a structure for all, or you're building in Chinatown, accessibility is equally important for you. So do show more of the context, yeah, the integration with Little India itself, the integration with the HDB that you alluded to, but perhaps could have expanded, yeah, because when you make these points, integration, connections, yeah, community, these are very, very specific terms that you as students, but also as professionals, will work on, chew on for decades to come. Yeah. So listen, I thought that was just a very brief synopsis. And Christine, I'm sure we'll circle back to the projects again in a second, but why don't I open it up more to you to see if you had any other points you would like to raise or discuss.
Yeah, I think that was really sort of insightful to catch the parallel between the way of working on kit of parts, first as a material kit of parts, and then later as almost like a way to program, right? So we see that parallel, and I think that way of working with system, I think that's what the strength of our students seems to lie. to sort of understand a kind of organizational systemic way of looking at issues and how do you break them down. Even I think in Matthew's project where it is more the kind of effect of spaces, I noticed that he's very systematic in breaking down, right, what contribute to those effects. So I think that's something I appreciate about sort of the kind of strength of the students, and it comes through in the way they talk about the work. All right, I think you've touched on a little bit about this, Roland. So my next question is, our program expands on new narratives and possibilities through the use of technology in design and the built environment. And this is, of course, reflected in the design studio topics that we've seen, the briefs and agenda. From your experience in an international practice, what do you see as a game-changing near future development that is enabled by the use of technology in design and the built environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive area to discuss, and it really depends on how you'd like to employ technology. Many of the essential enhancements that we now see through computational design, BIM, and so on, is that suddenly every element of a building is identifiable, measurable. You can measure its weight. You know the sustainability, the impact on the overall embodied carbon story of your entire project. And you know that before, so you carbon count everything. You literally, and you do this through technology. You do this through our BIM models, our technologies, and it really reshapes your mindset, your care and attention of what you design, and also how you put it together and how it is disassembled in the future. So that's a very interesting impact of technology on our mindset. There's many ways one can use technology. One can use it to create form, but we are perhaps a bit more on the applied side at Foster & Partners. So that care and attention, that extra insight that technology now offers us is quite extraordinary. Where and certainly how that allows us to work in a much more integrated fashion with not just as architects. Architects alone can no longer raise the bar to that Paris compliant target. Do no longer believe that you on your own can solve it all, yet you remain the key curators of entire big teams of engineers, architects, designers to hit those Paris compliance targets that Singapore has also signed up for. So that technology is changing what we can do, what we can measure. It taught us that integration is ever becoming more important. But listen, there's perhaps not enough time today to touch on all these other things that are coming down the pipeline. Yeah, computational design, artificial intelligence, all of which do hold a lot of promise. Of course, there's a lot of hype out there, and we do see them coming through in our professional practice in small steps. None of them has yet replaced the human's intelligence to integrate often contradictory facts. Maybe when you're my age, it will be different, but it certainly holds a promise, and we can see a lot of change, new tools arriving. But listen, as I said, we're slightly more on the applied side. We want tools to give us answers to specific questions, rather than letting tools create answers for us that we never had a question for, that we never asked for, if that makes sense. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Christine, I'm rambling. Stop me.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think this is a really good sort of, I mean, I'm also curious coming from, writing studio topics and sort of proposing, especially when we go to master thesis, where the students sort of endeavor into creating impacts, right? Sort of work that create impacts in the industry. So it's just I'm really curious what you would think, having seen sort of the practice in an international level. Okay, so my last question, which is kind of, I guess, is coming back to the student and them as individuals. Our graduating students will be on the lookout to join the industry in order to continue in their growth as design professionals. So as much as the industry is looking for a best match for their team, what would you say to the graduates and what they should look out for in the industry that can support their growth?
Yeah, no, I think it's an important point, an important conversation to have as you all look forward to enter this profession. And I think it's obviously has to be a nuanced response because all of your desires will be different. Yeah, some of you will want to be a design architect. Some of you will want to be a QP. Some of you will find that after dipping your toes into this profession for a little while, you will study again or apply your thinking elsewhere. So there really isn't an easy one size fits all answer here. But obviously, I guess the key point will be is to choose carefully. Yeah. What are you passionate about? Yeah. What is important to you? And choose the people that you approach to work for very carefully, right? What's your vision? What's your dream? Where do you want to get to? Is important in the selection of your careers, yeah, and places to work for. But it's also important that this is not, it's only a small step in your future in terms of who you work for in the first instance is a stepping stone. Yeah, it may teach you a lot about what you want to do or what you want to do differently. Yeah, so there really isn't an easy one size fits all answer to this. If I did it for me personally, listen, I was more on the design side, so I wanted to work for design firms. I worked for boutique design firms first, but then once I understood that passion of design coming from the A and all these things, I got that. But at a certain stage, I wanted to work for a bigger firm that could, teaches you about the bigger projects and all these other things. Yeah. So I sort of developed my career in steps this way as well. So listen, no one size fits all, but follow your heart, know what you're passionate about, and do research the people that you want to work for. Yeah, I mean, I guess it goes without saying, all of you nowadays want to make sure that the people you work for got a plan, care, have a clear idea of the goals they have and how it contributes to the planet and all these good things. Those would be my parameters. Yeah, if I got to choose again. Yeah, but I'm sure you're no different. I'm sure you guys will have got your own hearts and mind, your own rules, your own standards that you'll apply to your prospective choices. Yeah, so good luck with them. Yeah, I'm sure you'll all do great. Yeah. Thanks, Christine.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Roland, for sharing your quick sort of history of the kind of thing. I'm sure that was candid. Right. Yeah, I think that sort of concludes the quick conversations we have around your work. It's not meant to be a critique.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I know that's when architects get passionate, right? And they want to spend half an hour on each job. But listen, I don't know how you're in schedule, but are there any questions from the students to Christine, to your professor? Anything you want to ask? I'm sure we probably don't have time, Christine, so do stop me. But if there are any questions, I'm sure we'd be happy to respond.
Yes, anybody. I think that this is a public event, so I'm sure there are students as much as younger younger students who wants to consider architecture as a profession, or parents. I'm sure your family members are here, and also industry.
Do we have any parents here? That would be amazing.
All right. Okay. So if not, I'll hand the time back to Wai Hin or to Yunqing. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you to Roland and Christine for the really thought-provoking discussion and the timely advice. Yeah, so we are now coming to the end of the event. Maybe invite everyone to turn on their cameras for our photo taking session led by Wai Hin.
Yeah, can everyone just turn on their cameras for 1 sec? And we'll just take a quick picture. All right. Okay, I'll take a shot now. Okay, there's still more people. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, on the count of three. 3, 2, 1, smile.
All right.
All right, okay.
Okay, thank you, Wahin, and thank you everyone for
Thank you,
attending today's graduation showcase opening ceremony. Once again, do check out both the physical exhibition at the SUTD Campus Center from 11 March to 11 April and the virtual showcase via the website. Thank you and have a nice evening. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
job,
you,
everybody.
Roland.
Yeah, I'll come and see you at the university. I'm keen to see the
Yes,
exhibition.
yes.
All right, guys. Bye, Christine.
Bye.
Bye-bye.